Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has received the Director General of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, Fernando Arias. And several speakers at the 4th Commission of the 78th Session of the UN General Assembly in charge of political and decolonization issues have called for granting the Sahrawi people the right to self-determination. And the leader in Nagorno-Karabakh, the UN mission found the enclave almost empty of Armenians. And those were the major developments. Now, the full news edition. Good afternoon. The Minister of Foreign Affairs at the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has received the Director General of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, Fernando Arias, who is on a visit to Algeria. More details with Mohamed Khatel.
In a statement to the press after the meeting, Mr. Arias indicated that Algeria was an active country in the field of disarmament. He underlined that his organization has worked for 26 years for the destruction of all declared chemical weapons in the world to complete this great task this year. He added that 70,000 tons of the most dangerous poisons in the world have been destroyed under the supervision of the organization, thanks to the support of the 193 member states, including Algeria, which is an active and positive country in the field of disarmament. The head of the OPCW also underscored that he had the opportunity to discuss with Mr. Attaf in a very open and very friendly manner. He noted in this regard a convergence of views on the need to work together to guarantee peace and security in the world. Finally, Fernando Arias said he hoped that Algeria would continue to play a positive role within the OPCW to confront the great challenges.
And the Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, General Saïd Changri, had today chaired at the Pan Maritime Exhibition Hall in Algiers the opening of the VIP day of the CHIMAX Africa exercise intended for the states parties to the Convention on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in the African region. The opening ceremony of this event, organized under the patronage of was organized under the patronage of the President of the Republic, Supreme Chief of the Armed Forces, and Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. And in his opening speech, Mr. Changriha emphasized the active role played by Algeria in implementing the Convention of the OPCW.
Algeria underlines its strong conviction about the necessity of strengthening international peace and security through the prohibition of weapons of mass destruction, including chemical weapons. Hence, my country, in its capacity as member in the Executive Committee since the creation of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, is proud of playing an active role in the efforts made and of being a committed actor in the implementation of the Convention on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and the prohibition of building storage facilities or threatening to resort to them, given that it's a country free from chemical weapons and does not wish to acquire them.
And the delegation of the National People's Assembly has taken part in the meetings of the UN 4th Committee in charge of political and decolonization issues at the UN headquarters in New York. The Algerian delegates are pleading for the effective and rapid organization of a self-determination referendum for the Sahrawi people. The delegation is also expected to denounce the colonization of Morocco into Western Sahara and repeated human rights violations against peaceful Sahrawi civilians. And Energy and Mines Minister Mohamed Arkab has appointed Rashid Hashishi as CEO of the Sonatrach Hydrocarbons Group in replacement of Tawfiq Hakar. The installation came following instruction from the President of the Republic. And several speakers at the fourth commission of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly in charge of political and decolonization issues have called for granting the Sahrawi people the right to self-determination and independence. The permanent representative of Cuba in New York, Pedro Luis Pedroso Cuesta, highlighted the right of the people of Western Sahara to self-determination in line with the principles and goals of the UN Charter and international law. He added that Cuba is not in favor of the unilateral actions and decisions that marginalize the interests of Sahrawis. And to the Middle East now, two Palestinian youngsters today were injured by rubber-coated metal bullets, while dozens were suffocated during confrontations with the occupation forces south of the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. Mohammed Khatil again.
Stefan Dujarric, the spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, said the United Nations team on the ground, the first UN mission to the region in 30 years, would identify the humanitarian needs both for people remaining and the people that are on the move. Many of the Armenians who fled Nagorno-Karabakh said they felt the international mission's visit came too late, after Azerbaijan reclaimed the area in a lightning military operation last month. Armenian authorities said that by Monday evening, more than 100,000 people from a population of about 120,000 had fled to Armenia from Artsakh. A spokesperson for Nagorno-Karabakh's emergency services said on Sunday that the number of civilians left in Stepanakert could be counted on one hand. Earlier, the leader of the separatist enclave Nagorno-Karabakh has promised to stay in the capital of the territory until the end of the rescue operations. He said he will stay in Stepanakert with a group of officials until the end of rescue operations and the search for missing people due to military operations and explosion of a fuel depot at the end of September. An Azerbaijani government official said media would also be allowed to visit the region.
14 hours 37 minutes Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And in Syria, 2 soldiers were injured and material damage was sustained in an air raid by Israeli forces. 2 Syrian soldiers have been injured following an Israeli air attack on military posts in Syria's eastern Deir Zur region. Syria state news agency said the latest attack by the Israeli occupation was carried out at 11:50 p.m. local time on Monday. And to Nagorno-Karabakh now, the UN mission found the enclave almost empty of Armenians. Mohammed Khatil tells us more.
Settlement resistance activist told Wafa news agency that dozens of settlers from an illegal Israeli settlement attacked the homes of citizens in the village, which led to confrontations with the occupation forces that resulted in injuring 2 youths with a rubber bullet, while another was left with a broken hand as dozens suffocated due to inhaling toxic gas fired at them. He pointed out that the settlers cut down electricity poles at a distance of approximately 500 meters from the electricity network connecting the towns of Qasra and Jalud. Separately, Palestinian Christians, religious leaders, monks, priests, and those who make pilgrimage to Al-Quds complained of being subjected to fierce attacks by Israeli settlers, specifically during their holidays in the city of Al-Quds. Several videos went viral on social media showing a group of Israeli settlers spitting on a group of Christian worshippers for no apparent reasons while they were celebrating the Jewish holidays of Sukkot in the old city of Al-Quds. Coordinator of the World Church Council in Al-Quds, Youssef Daher, told Wafa news agency that Christian pilgrims in Al-Quds have been subjected to regular attacks in the past 2 years, specifically under the current Israeli government. He pointed out that officials in the church are not satisfied because the world doesn't intervene to stop such attacks against Christians, the latest of which when the holy monastery of the Praetorium was attacked by settlers 6 months ago. Daher added that Israeli settlers spat on the face of a priest from the Armenian community in the city of Al-Quds in 1 year. He confirmed that officials in church filed 12 statements protesting such violations and attacks at the end of 2021.
And that was Mohammed Khatil telling us about 2 Palestinian youngsters who were injured today, Tuesday, by rubber metal bullets, while dozens were suffocated during confrontations with the occupation forces in the village of Jalud, south of the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. And Turkish police detained about 145 people across the country overnight suspected of links to the Kurdistan Workers' Party PKK 2 days after a bomb attack in Ankara claimed by the militant group. On Sunday, 2 attackers detonated a bomb near government buildings in Ankara, killing them both and wounding 2 police officers. The PKK group claimed responsibility. Turkey subsequently carried out airstrikes on militant targets in northern Iraq and detained suspects in Istanbul overnight hours after the PKK made its claim of responsibility. The latest police operations were centered in Turkey's southeastern Sanliurfa province. 14 hours 41 minutes, Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And back to Algeria now. National and international press have tackled Niger's acceptance of Algeria's mediation, describing it as a major step that may pave the way for a peaceful solution to the crisis. Mohamed Khatel.
The majority of the national press has underlined the recent decision of the authorities in Niger to accept Algeria's mediation provided for in the peace settlement initiative presented by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, to find a peaceful solution to the crisis besetting the neighboring country. The daily Al Mujahid wrote in banner headline, Initiative of the President of the Republic for a political solution to the crisis in Niger. Niamey accepts Algeria's mediation. In its article, Al Mujahid underlined that the decision to accept the Algerian initiative strengthens the approach of a political solution to the crisis and paves the way to meeting the conditions which will allow to overcome it peacefully in the interest of Niger and the entire region. For its part, the Arabic-speaking daily Al Khabar wrote, Niger accepts Algeria's mediation to end the crisis. The newspaper underscored President Tebboune's decision to immediately send the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the national community abroad, Ahmed Attaf, to Niamey to start talks with the various stakeholders in order to start implementing Algeria's initiative. The French-speaking newspaper Le Soir d'Algérie wrote, Crisis in Niger, Niamey accepts Algeria's mediation as part of President Tebboune's initiative. Meanwhile, Al Khabar daily newspaper wrote in banner headline, Minister Attaf entrusted with traveling to Niamey to implement a peaceful solution after Niger's acceptance of Algeria's mediation. For its part, the Arabic-speaking newspaper Ashab put as a headline, Algeria's initiative to resolve the crisis in Niger, green light. It emphasized that the acceptance of the Algerian mediation will preserve the interests of Niger and the region as a whole. The international press has also tackled Niger's acceptance of Algeria's mediation, describing it as a major step that may pave the way for a peaceful solution to the crisis. Russia Today said the acceptance of the Algerian initiative strengthens the option of a political solution to the crisis in Niger and opens the way for providing the necessary conditions that would facilitate ending this crisis by peaceful means. China's Xinhua agency said Niger has accepted Algeria's mediation proposal aimed at finding a political solution to the ongoing crisis, and the Algerian president has already instructed the foreign minister to travel to Niamey, the capital of Niger. CNN, for its part, described the acceptance of Algeria's mediation as an offer that addresses Niger's ongoing political crisis that has exhausted the West African country. Al Arabiya News, for its part, emphasized the acceptance of Algeria's mediation aimed at a political solution following the proposal made by Algeria in late August. It described the acceptance of the mediation as a way for a possible peace, as it proposed a transition period of up to 6 months. Al Jazeera reposted the communique released by the Algerian Foreign Ministry, wherein it announced that Niger accepted the mediation, given more information about Algeria's proposal, notably that it includes 6 axes that stipulate restoring the constitutional order within 6 months under the leadership of an agreed-upon civilian figure, and calling for preparations for the holding of an international development conference in countries. It also recalled that the Organization of the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, has repeatedly threatened to use force to restore constitutional order in Niger, stressing that Algeria's initiative may ease tensions.
14 hours 45 minutes. Algiers time, you're still listening to Radio Algeria International and to the Western Sahara issue now. The Polisario Front reaffirmed that the legal proceedings it is leading at the Court of Justice of the European Union to put an end to the illegal exploitation by the Moroccan occupier of Western Sahara's natural resources is based on the firm foundations of CJEU's judgment of 2016, which decided that Western Sahara and Morocco are two separate territories. In a statement published on Saturday following the notification by the CJEU of the hearing dates set on 24 and 25 October for the two appeals made by the European Council and Commission against judgments of the Justice, which, at the request of the Front, voided in 2021 the new EU-Morocco Fisheries Agreement and the agreement on the tariff preferences illegally including the occupied Sahrawi territories. Or still with the Sahrawi issue, the Sahrawi official in charge of the judicial file, Obi Bouchraya Bashir, said in a statement that the approach is to start from the excellent basis of the 2016 judgment and to amplify its scope to eradicate this dishonest game of extension agreements made against the Sahrawi people's will. He said, our people are enduring negative effects, namely the plundering of their natural resources and huge economic flaws which enable the Moroccan occupier to finance the colonization of the territory. Moreover, the African Court on Human and People's Rights has validated our agreements, as he put it, by affirming that there has never been any doubt about the Sahrawi people's sovereignty over their national territory. He said we had noticed a similar analysis between the International Court of Justice, the African Court, and the Court of Justice of the European Union, adding that the full application of the international law driven by the unity of the people is the approach of Sahrawis. 14 hours 47 minutes Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and that's it, dear listeners, for our news bulletin. Let's listen now to Rice Health Magazine, compiled and presented by Mohamed Khatel.
Hello and welcome to this new edition of your weekly program, The Health Magazine, devoted today to one of the most serious diseases that animals can transfer to humans, namely rabies. Rabies is a viral infection that primarily spreads through a bite from an infected animal. If not treated timely and adequately, rabies is usually fatal for both humans and animals. Rabies is an RNA virus of the rhabdovirus family that can affect the body in one of two ways. It can enter the peripheral nervous system directly and migrate to the brain. It can also replicate within muscle tissue, where it is safe from the host's immune system. From here, it enters the nervous system through the neuromuscular junctions. Once inside the nervous system, the virus produces acute inflammation of the brain, coma, and death soon follows. There are two types of rabies. The first type, furious or encephalitic rabies, occurs in 80% of human cases, and a person with it is more likely to experience hyperactivity and hydrophobia. The second type, called paralytic or dumb rabies, causes paralysis as a dominant symptom. Rabies is most common in countries where stray dogs are present in large numbers, with Asia and Africa accounting for 95% of cases. As saliva carries the virus, rabies can develop if an infected animal bites someone. It can also occur if saliva from an infected animal gets into an open wound or through a mucous membrane, such as the eyes or mouth. However, the virus cannot pass through unbroken skin. In some countries, raccoons, coyotes, bats, skunks, foxes, and dogs are the animals most likely to spread the virus. Bats carrying rabies exist in many countries too. Any mammal can harbor and transmit the virus, but smaller mammals, such as rodents, rarely become infected or transmit rabies. Rabbits are also unlikely to spread rabies. Rabies progresses in 5 distinct stages: incubation, prodrome, acute neurological period, coma, and death. Incubation is the time before symptoms appear. It usually lasts from 2 to 3 months and varies from 1 week to 1 year. Depending on where the virus entered the body and the number of viral particles involved, the closer the bite is to the brain, the sooner the effects are likely to appear. By the time symptoms appear, rabies is usually fatal. Anyone who has exposure to the virus should seek medical care immediately without waiting for symptoms. During prodrome, early flu-like symptoms occur, including a fever of 38 degrees or above, headache, anxiety, feeling generally unwell, sore throat and a cough, nausea and vomiting, discomfort at the site of the bite. During this stage, neurologic symptoms develop, including confusion and aggression, partial paralysis, involuntary muscle twitching, rigid neck muscles, convulsions, hyperventilation and difficulty breathing, hypersalivation or producing a lot of saliva, frothing at the mouth, fear of water or hydrophobia, hallucinations, nightmares and insomnia, photophobia or fear of light. Toward the end of this phase, breathing becomes rapid and inconsistent. A person may enter a coma and most people then die within 3 days. During the coma stage, even with supportive therapy, virtually no person survives rabies. People used to call rabies hydrophobia because it appears to cause a fear of water. The reason is that the infection causes intense spasm in the throat when a person tries to swallow. Even the thought of swallowing water can cause spasms, making it appear that the individual is afraid of water. If doctors are not certain that an individual received a bite from an animal infected with rabies, they typically must exclude other conditions first. Healthcare professionals may perform multiple tests without concluding the individual has rabies. Laboratory tests may show antibodies, but these may not appear until later in the development of the disease. Doctors could potentially isolate the virus from a person's saliva or through a skin biopsy. However, at the time they confirm a diagnosis, it is often too late to act. For this reason, the individual usually starts a course of prophylactic treatment immediately without waiting for a confirmed diagnosis. If a person develops symptoms of viral encephalitis following an animal bite, doctors should treat them as if they may have rabies. If a person has a bite or scratch from an animal that may have rabies, or if the animal licks an open wound, the individual should immediately wash any bites and scratches for 15 minutes with soapy water, Providone iodine, or detergent. This might minimize the number of viral particles. They must then seek immediate medical attention. After exposure and before symptoms begin, a series of shots can treat potential rabies infections. Because doctors do not usually know whether the animal had rabies, it is safer to assume that they do and begin vaccination. A small number of people have survived rabies, but most cases are fatal once symptoms develop and there is no effective treatment at this stage. Instead, healthcare professionals will usually try and make a person with symptoms as comfortable as possible. These individuals may also need breathing assistance. Doctors do not offer the rabies vaccine routinely. Instead, they reserve it for those at high risk of rabies exposure, such as laboratory staff working with the virus that causes the disease, veterinarians, and people likely to receive animal bites. These individuals may receive regular vaccinations. Other people may receive the vaccine following exposure to the virus after an animal bite. This is called post-exposure prophylaxis. Rabies vaccine contains an inactivated or a harmless version of the rabies virus, so it cannot cause the disease. It triggers the immune response to produce antibodies which remain in the body and help protect against future rabies infections. Doctors administer the rabies vaccine into the upper arm. Pre-exposure protection requires 3 doses of rabies vaccine across 28 days. Rabies is a serious disease, but individuals and governments can take steps to prevent infections. These strategies include regular rabies vaccinations for pets and domestic animals, bans or restrictions on the import of animals from certain countries, widespread vaccinations of humans in some areas, educational information and awareness, enhanced access to medical care to people who receive bites. In rural Canada and the US, for example, agencies have dropped bait containing an oral vaccine to reduce the number of wild animals with rabies. Individuals should follow some safety rules to reduce the chances of contracting rabies. Vaccinate pets. Find out how often to vaccinate cats, dogs, ferrets, and other domestic or farm animals and keep the vaccination up to date. Protect small pets. Some pets cannot have vaccinations, so their owners must prevent contact with wild animals. Keep pets confined. Owners should confine pets safely while at home or supervise them. Report strays to local authorities. Contact local animal control officials or police departments regarding stray animals. Do not approach wild animals. Animals with rabies are likely to be less cautious than usual and may approach people. Keep bats out of the home. Seal houses to prevent bats from nesting and call an expert to remove any bats present. And to summarize, rabies is a deadly virus that infected animals spread through their saliva. It causes flu-like symptoms initially, which progress into fever, muscle spasms, coma, and eventually death. Although there is no effective treatment once symptoms appear, rabies vaccines are usually successful in preventing infections. However, people must seek treatment immediately and not wait for any symptoms to appear. Individuals at high risk of rabies infections, such as veterinarians, should have pre-exposure vaccinations. Anyone who has a bite from a potentially infected animal should receive immediate medical attention and post-exposure vaccinations. They may also require fast-acting RIG if they have not already had the vaccine for the virus. And with this, we come to the end of this week's edition of your program, The Health Magazine. Do join us next week for a new edition with another health topic to be dealt with. Thank you.
14 hours 57 minutes Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and that was Mohammed Khatel telling us in the Health Magazine about rabies, its symptoms and diagnosis. We'll meet you again tomorrow for our full news edition, so goodbye for now.
العالم يتغير